We're celebrating 700 years since the great Italian poet died. But who was he? He lived from 1265 until 1321. He was a father, a writer, an orator, one of 6 mayors of Florence, and he also fought for his political party on the battlefield at Campaldino. He was exiled from his home city, Florence, for the last 20 years of his life, having been accused of corruption. The truth of the matter was that his political views were an inconvenience to Pope Boniface, who sought to control Florence and its political affairs. He was fined and banned from public office. As Dante refused to pay the fine, and anyway his assets had been grabbed by the opposition party, he was exiled and told he could only return to Florence on pain of death. Just last month, descendants of both Dante and the judge who pronounced his sentence ran a mock retrial to see whether under today's law the judgment would have been upheld. Not surprisingly, it was deemed to be purely political. Dante was the son of a moneylender who did well enough to buy property, and the income from these meant that Dante didn't need to profess a profession up until his exile. He did become an apothecary shortly after becoming mayor, because joining an artisans' guild was a requirement in order to hold public office. It is quite a good idea, isn't it? Making local politicians volunteer for a chosen industry: arts, retail, healthcare, sports, in the city or town in which they govern. Anyway, the family lived in a district surrounded by important families, some of whom were their relations. Dante put many of his neighbours into the Divine Comedy for stoking political tension or family feuds. These everyday personalities end up jostling alongside emperors, classical heroes, and all sorts in the comedy. Other important neighbours were the Donati family, whose daughter Gemma was proposed to Dante at the age of 12. The marriage seems to me to be based on practical concerns rather than any depth of feeling on Dante's side. I'm sure Dante would sympathise with my attack on forced marriage, which figures in the adaptation. Dante's real love was embodied in Beatrice, at first in her human form, and later in her spiritual form. Beatrice was the daughter of a banker, Falco Portinari, a friend of Dante's father. They were invited to the Portinari house for a May Day celebration, when Dante, aged 9, first met Beatrice, who was aged 8. It was love at first sight. He went on to idolise her, and she became his literary muse, representing divine grace and Dante's guide to redemption in the Divine Comedy. Dante lived through constant political feuding and battles between the 2 main factions, called Guelphs and Ghibellines, with power swinging from one to the other like a pendulum. The Guelphs supported the Pope, while the Ghibellines supported the Holy Roman Emperor. The strife and instability surrounding Florence clearly affected Dante, as he placed 68 of his contemporaries in hell, compared with 19 in purgatory and 8 in paradise. Although he proclaimed himself a Guelph, Dante was deeply frustrated by the interference by the Pope in state affairs. He felt the Church should stick to its spiritual mission and keep its nose out of politics. The Church was full of corruption and conniving for power. Shortly after his time as mayor in Florence, he was sent as ambassador to Rome to try to ease the friction between the warring political parties. He pleaded with Pope Boniface VIII to keep out of Florence's affairs, but Boniface felt threatened by Dante's opposition. Boniface tried to charm Dante with his intelligence and learning, but his aim was to manipulate Dante into staying in Rome, while he dealt with the threat of obstruction to power. He opted for military force and ordered Charles de Valois to send troops to Florence to root out political subversives. Charles believed he might be given the key to the Holy Roman Emperor, for agreeing to help the Pope out, but that was wishful thinking. Dante was accused of fraud, corruption, and conspiracy against the Pope and the Guelph party, and since Dante was held tenuously captive in Rome at the time and refused to pay the fine imposed on him, he was exiled and prevented from returning to Florence for the rest of his life. He spent his time wandering Italy, staying with various friends, and wrote the majority of the Divine Comedy over this period. For that at least we can be thankful. Please find a link to Hell on Earth and to my blog in the description below.